Just before we get into this week's podcast, I want to take a couple of minutes just to answer the question set by Mike Clayton in the previous podcast. So Mike Clayton asked, what is the leader's role in project governance? And project governance, for those that aren't aware, is essentially the framework of any project on how organizations or the project board make decisions about the project. So for me, there are many things that leaders have got to do in order to make sure that that process works completely seamlessly. However, the key aspect that leaders have to do, from my view, is provide utter clarity about the process, about the expectations. So who makes the decisions? How do they make decisions? What is that process? What information is required at each stage to make those decisions? And the better clarity that everybody along the pyramid, if you like, of chain of command from the top right down to the bottom, the better clarity that everybody has, the better we are able to streamline project governance. So enjoy this week's podcast. This week we're talking to Chris Peel about motivation. Hello and welcome to the 14th episode of the Leadership in Construction podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today I have an absolute special guest for us. I'm joined by the entrepreneur, Chris Peel. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, Michael, thanks very much for having me. Really pleased to be here.
Thank you. So you and I, Chris, we go back a long way. We went to school with one another, and since then I've sort of watched your career grow into what you're doing today as an entrepreneur in property. Yeah. And the sort of things you're doing, great things in terms of providing properties for the construction sector. So the first thing I sort of want to do is get a bit of background behind how you got into this, how you got into property, and what led you along into this route into entrepreneurship.
Awesome. Okay, so before getting into the whole entrepreneurial space and starting my own business, I was very much in the corporate world. So I was out of university with a degree in business management, did a master's in marketing, and then went into like the corporate world. So my first job was at Jaguar Land Rover. I was on their graduate scheme, and there I was trained as a purchasing practitioner. So I was in their buying team. Part of the responsibility there was getting parts in for engines. So we were in the engines team, and we kind of negotiated on contracts. And then after that, I landed what I suppose at the time felt to me like my dream job, which was as a management consultant. I was working for PwC down in London. So I relocated down to London, started doing this job. And I guess had I not done that job, I may never have ended up in entrepreneurship, because it was doing that job that revealed to me that the path that I thought I wanted to go on in life wasn't really what I wanted at all. So up until that point, for me, success had meant getting into a great company with a well-recognized brand, and then just climbing that corporate ladder until maybe one day I can end up as like a director or a partner of a firm. And so I started doing this job, and I was sent down to a South Coast City Council as one of my first projects. And the project was to help them meet their new central government budgets. So this was back in like 2013, 14 sort of time. And I don't know if you remember, but back then there was all the austerity measures in place. So local councils were having their budgets cut, and we were sent in to try and help this city council to meet their new central government budgets, because their spending was way bigger than the budget that they'd now been allocated. So that effectively meant laying people off. So every day I would go into the office and just be greeted with stares, like in a Western movie when somebody walks into the bar and it's just like the piano playing stops, people stop taking drinks, and everyone just looks at you. So that was our experience for about 9 months while we were there every day. Like, people just freaking hated us. And I don't blame them, because like we were there to, decide who stayed and who went. Apparently I did a good job on that one. So then I got promoted onto a more prestigious project within the company. And again, I would say it was no more inspiring. Instead of being responsible for making people redundant, this was a project for a weapons manufacturer. So these guys built missiles and bombs. And our job, again, was to go in there and look at their procurement processes, and look at how we could improve the efficiency of their procurement processes, effectively making the end product cheaper for them to manufacture. Which, bigger picture stuff means we're just reducing the cost of taking someone's life. We're reducing the cost of pressing the button that drops the bomb, which again isn't a particularly inspiring place to work. It's not something that you get up and go, hey, how much can I cut off the cost of ending a life today? But all of this put me in a different mindset where I was open to new ideas. And I guess what really changed everything was one day when I was coming back into London on the train, and I happened to sit opposite the guy that recruited me for that job in the first place. And this was somebody who in terms of leadership, had got exactly where I wanted to be. Okay, so this guy was a true leader. Likeable, respectable, hardworking, had got where he'd got because he'd earned it, had the respect of his team, treated his team well, all the things that I wanted to be one day. And exactly what success looked like for me as well is exactly how I thought, that's where I want to be. And so kind of after 20 minutes of just talking to each other about small talk, about what we were doing on our projects and, how he was busy, how I was busy, what we were doing. I hadn't actually seen the guy since he'd had this promotion to a director. He's recently promoted into the director of the firm. He was on fast track to be a partner. So I took the opportunity to congratulate him. And looking back at me wasn't the face of somebody that was passionate about their new role, wasn't the face of someone who kind of enjoyed what they'd become. And so I said to him, I was like, what's the matter? And he said to me, and I'll never forget these words, he said to me, Chris, I know I should be happy. I know I've achieved everything I ever wanted to in my career. I'm a director now. I'm on a fast track to partner. Within the next 18 months, I should be a partner of this firm. I've had a big pay rise. And I was like, but what? And he was like, but despite all of this, I've had to move from my 5-bedroom house in the country with a nice big garden where my kids can play into central London, where I'm living now in a 3-bedroom flat next to the office because I don't have time to commute anymore. I barely see my kids. I'm out of the house in the morning before they're up, and I'm back by the time that they're in bed. I see them on Sundays only, and then I'm so exhausted from the week's work that I don't really have the energy to enjoy them. I'm piling weight on. I'm living off takeaway. I'm piling weight on. I feel like my health's deteriorating. The stress is killing me. And despite the pay rises, despite the extra bonuses, for all the extra stuff that I've had to get, childcare, linen pickup services, takeaways, all this extra stuff that he has to buy, despite the big bonuses and the extra pay rise, he has less money at the end of each month than before he got promoted. And for me, that was just like a holy shit moment. Like, wow, completely destroyed this illusion of where I wanted to get to. And I guess you could say that's like the ultimate leadership, right? Is recognizing that you've got to a point where you're no longer happy and advising other people based on your own mistakes. I guess like that's ultimate accountability, isn't it? So yeah, he basically told me that the last 30 to 40 years of his career had got him to a place where he wasn't happy. And I went back into the office that day a bit deflated. I was like, well, surely it can't be that bad. Like, you're on a 6-figure salary. It can't be that bad. And I started looking around at all the people my age, all the kind of mid-20s, like the young go-getters. And it was depressing. Like everybody was bitching about everyone else behind their back, stabbing each other in the back to get the better projects, to get the promotion, whinging, moaning, complaining. And I had this horrible realization that I was exactly the same. And that if I didn't do something differently, then I would end up, if I was one of the lucky ones, I may end up like this guy that recruited me for the job. I might end up like him, advising the 20-something-year-old that I regretted the last 40 years of my career. And I decided that I needed to do something differently. And that's when I got into property. That's when I started educating myself about different property investment strategies and techniques, how to raise finance, how to acquire properties without having to have full deposits and doing cash purchases, how to add value to properties and be able to recycle deposits back out of them. And that's really where it all began for me.
So what was it about property then that sort of like got you interested initially, that made you want to research more and move into that area?
Yeah, great question. So I guess property as an asset class is fairly unique in that, you know, aside for blips in value like the 2008 crisis, it's generally pretty strong. Now, you've got places like London right now are struggling a bit, but I would argue that's because of lockdown. But there aren't many asset classes that will, you know, consistently go up in value over time, as well as providing an income that is, you know, really quite respectable. It's not like a 1% dividend or a 2% dividend that you can get from stocks. It, you know, it can be 10, 20, you know, even over 100% return on your investment if you get your investment strategies right. So I guess that was really what got me into property as an asset class, because of the fact that you could replace your income from a job fairly quickly, as well as building true long-term wealth from acquiring assets.
So in terms of the property, in terms of how you moved into it, what was it you're actually sort of doing, if you don't mind me asking? Because I want to find out how you've got to where you are today, but it sort of starts off with that, I don't know, first purchase or first whatever it was. What was that first thing that you did?
Okay, yeah, sure. So the very first project I ever did in property, I guess, aside from renting out a room to a mate of mine who was just living with me for a while, but I guess the first business project was a serviced apartment in North London. And I met a landlord at a Watford-based networking event. And at that event, you had the opportunity to stand up in front of the crowd and pitch yourself, which at the time I was super uncomfortable with public speaking. That was terrifying. But at the time I had the help of a coach and mentor who was telling me how to push myself in this field. And one of their challenges was that I had to stand up and do this. So I was like, fine, well, you know what? I'm going for it. I'm terrified, but I'm going for it. And I pitched myself at that networking event as somebody who could help people earn a greater return from their existing portfolios. And I thought I'd absolutely codsed it up. You know, I came off stage and I thought that was horrendous. No one's going to talk to me. But sure enough, at the break, someone came over and he was like, well, look, I have a portfolio. I've got 7 properties in London. I'm interested in running a few of them as serviced apartments. Do you know anything about serviced apartments? And I was like, yeah, I totally know about serviced apartments. The honest answer was I'd never even heard of serviced apartments at the time. I didn't really know what they were, but I knew that there was an opportunity here and I wanted to explore it. So the next day, I got on the phone to my mentor. I was like, what's a serviced apartment? Run me through what this is. How does this work? And they basically brought me up to speed. And then I met the guy the next day. And we went around his apartment, had a look at it, figured out what needed doing in terms of a bit of a refurb. He spent about £10,000 on a refurb for the property. And then I started to run his property for him as a serviced apartment, advertising on sites like Airbnb and Booking.com, and these kind of bread and butter sites, as we call them, like the basics, where if you want to get into serviced accommodation, you need to be present on those sites. And it worked really well. So we had a financial arrangement where the first X amount of income that he could have got just renting the property out to a normal tenant, he would get that first amount of the profit. And then any uplift that I created for him beyond that, we would split 70-30. And that left me with about £650 a month of income. So hadn't replaced my salary by any stretch, but it was a first step and it cost me nothing to do. There was zero upfront cost to me, apart from maybe like 40 quid to buy us dinner when we were first getting to know each other. So yeah, that was the first deal. Then that went really well. So he gave me the second one. Then that went really well. So he introduced me to a friend of his who I partnered with to do a third one. And that went really well. So he referred me on to another friend of his and we got a place in London Bridge and Harrow. And then it kind of just grew from there. Yeah, it started to get a bit of a reputation in the property industry as someone who was doing well with serviced apartments. And property is a very small world. I'm sure a lot of your listeners who are in the construction world will know that generally everyone knows everyone, especially on the property investor side of things.
Absolutely,
it's quite a small world.
Yes, in the sector that I work, aviation, yeah, it is a small world, and you find these little pockets within construction that are
Yeah.
everybody knows everybody. So absolutely. I mean, the one thing I remember sort of from following your sort of career is when you left PwC and that video that you made about you leaving.
Oh, have you
Um,
seen it?
Absolutely, yeah, I saw
Oh,
that.
great.
And to be honest, it must have been, and that was the point at which you'd gone left the company, your basically security, and taken on property full time. I mean, that must have been an absolute petrifying, scary time. Maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, it was, especially given that I hadn't replaced my salary when I walked out.
Wow.
So I'd done 2 deals. I was probably making about £1,800 a month of profit from those 2 deals combined. And the salary I was leaving was 3.5 grand a month after tax. So I was nowhere near replacing my salary. So it was a bit scary. But the way I looked at it was quite a cold calculation. And I figured, like, I'm working as a management consultant, so I'm limited in my time. And then my time was my biggest limitation because, on paper, I work 40 hours a week. In reality, we work more like 60 or 70. And 4 or 5 days a week, we're away wherever the client is. Now, for me, that was either Southampton for the first project and the second project, actually. But then it was Crawley in Surrey for the weapons manufacturer project. So that basically meant it took me away from London too much. So I was staying away as well. I was staying down there in hotels. So I did quite a cold calculation. I looked at it and I was like, well, if I'm working like 70 hours a week and that's making me 3.5 grand a month versus my property business, which I was only got 2 properties in, but it's taking maybe like 2 hours a week to maintain that, to just keep it going, and that's making me £1,800 a month. There's like my rate per hour in property is vastly different to what I'm getting from my job. So it was quite a cold calculation. I said, well, look, if I get those 70 hours back, if I buy them back for myself and say, okay, for the next few months, it's going to be pretty tough because I'm not going to have, basically cut my income in half. But that gives me the time to be able to then plow back into my property business. If I've managed to do 2 deals in about 3 months, having worked 70 hours a week for somebody else, what if I get those 70 hours and I work for myself? And that's when we really started to grow the business really quite a lot faster. And we started to get pretty much a new property into the portfolio every month. And it's pretty much been consistent like that since. So we pretty much do 1 deal a month on average. Maybe a little more recently because we've scaled, especially during COVID. We've shrunk in some areas and grown in other areas. So it's been a bit of a turbulent time.
Absolutely. It's like amazing results. So talk to me more about the connection with property and what you're doing, not property, your connection with construction and what you're sort of doing in terms of properties and accommodation for contractors.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll do. Happy to. So the business continued to grow as the model that I've described previously. And we wanted to keep with the tourist side of things because they were paying much higher rates. But as we grew the business, we started to diversify. And that's why we said, well, look, we're very exposed at the moment to just the London tourist market. That's all we really have exposure to. So we started looking outside of London at bigger properties, houses instead of flats. And we started working in Bedford and Luton. And I have business partners in those areas to handle the local geographic stuff. And we also started to try and expose ourselves to different markets. So as well as just having the tourist market, and thank God we did do this because the tourist market was a disaster during lockdown, we also opened ourselves up to the contractor market and tried to create some marketing that would expose us more to teams of contractors. So our first contractor client was a company called Chevron, traffic management company. And we provide the accommodation for their team who are working on the M4 right now. So if you drive down the M4, you have a big long stretch of 50 miles an hour. And they're on site for quite a long, extended period of time. And they were currently, at the first time we met them, they were living in caravans. So they were looking for a solution that would give their guys a better standard of accommodation, but for a comparable price to a hotel. So we were able to set up properties specifically for their teams where they'd each have their own private bedroom, brand new furniture, like nice, comfortable double mattress, living rooms where they could actually sit and relax in the evenings instead of kind of being perched on a bench in a caravan. And their own cooking facilities in the house as well. So it's a much more home from home experience, but at no extra cost, especially for teams. Now, for individuals, it's a bit more expensive, but for teams, it's no more expensive than a hotel, but a far greater standard of living. So that's when we started to target that market much more. And fairly recently, we've just launched our new brand to target this market, which is called Trade Stays. So really trying to hone in on the trade market, the contractor teams of contractors. And we offer to either accommodate those people in our existing portfolio, which is around, we've got national coverage between ourselves, our own properties, and all our partners spread around the UK. Or what we offer, which we find is really, really popular, is let's say, Mike, that you were the head of a team of, 15 people, and you needed something, and you look at your site, and the nearest Premier Inn is like half an hour's drive away. Whereas, like, do you want your team traveling an hour there and back each day, and then just having a box room? Or how about we set up a couple of houses right near your contractor site or right near your project site, so you could almost walk from door to door, or at least a short drive, for the same price as you get in the Premier Inn, but with all these extra facilities as well. And we find that that's really, really popular. And that's kind of how we're growing at the moment, is with this bespoke service. Now, obviously that only works on longer term stays. So where you've got like 6 months plus, we're able to set up bespoke houses. But with the network we have as well, even if it's shorter stays, we're able to find accommodation for those teams that really gives them that better standard of living. And that's how we want to continue to grow our brand. That's how we're gearing up at the moment. And it's quite an exciting project, one that I'm really excited about. And yeah, hopefully be able to tap into the contractor teams or teams of contractors market much better as the year goes on.
I mean, I think it's absolutely great idea what you're doing. I think for all the reasons that you mentioned about standard of living, being able to cook for yourself, because as someone that travels a lot for work, for construction projects, you do end up just eating whatever you can grab on the train or a service station, whatever. So I do think these are really sort of important aspects, and I add to that the importance around diversity and inclusion. The ability to have a house means that we talk about teams of contractors, and what pops into our brains, and is this no disrespect, it's just automatic, is a group of men who are at the coal face digging trenches inside the road. And the reality is a little bit different from that, in that we have women, we have ethnic diversity, and we have people with disabilities as well in our industry. And so the ability to be able to site them rather than in a caravan or a porta cabin or something else near to site, being able to put them into comfy homes, comfy environments where they can all the benefits that you mentioned, and much better standard of life
as well. So if you do have like accessibility requirements, because it's all done to spec, like whatever you require is able to be sourced. And there's also, I guess, quite topically as well, there's the whole infection control side of things as well.
Yeah.
If you're in a hotel with 200 other people going in and out, leaning on the same reception desk, pressing the same lift buttons, we're more aware than ever about infection control, aren't we? So I saw a startling statistic the other day that during COVID, 86% of project sites were closed down at some point because of COVID. And the study went on to say that most of those infections actually occur off-site. They don't occur on-site because it's airy, right? Most building sites are pretty well, not necessarily windy, but like airy. They're not enclosed conditions. So the infections were actually occurring in like the hotel lobbies and the dining rooms and the bars off-site rather than on-site. So it's another great benefit of this model, is that it gives you that self-contained bubble. Okay, so your team aren't mixing with other teams, they are together. And yes, they've created that bubble, so if one of them gets it, then they can lock down together. So there's added benefits from like a risk management and infection control perspective as well.
I mean, I think the coronavirus and COVID will eventually sort of slowly leave our lives, but it will be something that we'll have a legacy of, and we'll always take working in that style in a similar way, create these sort of bubbles, and prepared that should something else come along one day, that we're not in shock and awe, and we can actually deal with it because we know what we're doing. And the construction industry has been really good at being able to adapt to that and continue with most construction works, certainly during this sort of third lockdown now, which is fantastic, really, because we know what we're dealing with and we know how to do that, and to get work efficiently with the sort of restrictions in place. So, a lot of what you mentioned there, I think I can see all the benefits around that, and it's something that I would strongly recommend. Having sort of lived in porta cabins and things like that previously, I would definitely much prefer to come back to a sort of more cozy sort of home. So I think that's absolutely brilliant what you're doing. So just to sort of bring this more onto sort of the leadership topic, obviously you've got some great experiences in the corporate world, but also as an entrepreneur. So how is your view around leadership from sort of working at Jaguar Land Rover through to sort of now? How has it changed and how's that evolved?
Massively. I think leadership as a concept is very different when you're in the corporate world compared to the entrepreneurial space. Because in the corporate world, it's about for me, certainly, personally, it was about the figurehead. It was about who are you looking up to? Who are you wanting to emulate? Again, go back to PwC, it was about the guy that recruited me. He was everything that I wanted to be. So he inspired me to want to grow within the company to take that next step, until obviously I heard his devastating story. That had created this image of where I guess I wanted to be myself. Now, where it changes massively is when you step away from an environment like the corporate world and you've got very strict kind of structures for how things are done, very, very rigid processes, very, I guess, defined corporate hierarchies. When you step into that entrepreneurial space, it takes a bit of adjustment, not just from a where's my next paycheck coming from, but like from a self-drive point of view. So I think for me, leadership changed from having someone to look up to, someone to emulate, to being, more about self-leadership and more about self-drive. Because when you wake up in the morning as a business owner and you're the only person in the business, and at the time, I didn't hire anyone. When I started my business, it was just me, and maybe like a cleaning team for actually cleaning the apartments, but they weren't employees. They were a separate contracting company. So it was very much a case of, well, look, I can wake up at 6 or I can wake up at 9. No one's calling me to say, why are you late for work? So if I want to wake up at 6, then I've got to get myself out of bed. There's no accountability, where there's no boss on the end of the phone saying, why haven't you delivered this project? Why aren't you here at your desk? Where's last week's sales figures? None of that. So it's, for me, the concept of leadership changed a lot from having that fixed, rigid structure to being able to self-lead and self-manage and self-regulate myself much more. And that took quite a bit of adjustment for me. And especially actually when I got the business to the point that I had replaced my salary. To start with, it was kind of easy because I woke up and I went, holy shit, if I don't work right now, by Christmas I've run out of money. So that was a fairly good, like, I had this line in the sand that if I'm not making at least my salary before this point in time, I'm probably going to have to go back to work. And that would have felt like a failure for me. And as quite a competitive person, I didn't want to have to face that reality. So that was a lot of motivation there. But where it became harder to self-lead was at the point where the business had replaced my salary. And I'd got a team of people that meant that I didn't have to necessarily, whether I woke up in the morning or not, didn't necessarily make a difference to the business's performance that day. That's when it became really hard. So I guess like you become too comfortable. And I think if I look back now, I definitely took my foot off the gas way too much. And there's a period of my business where we had rapid growth to start with, and then we kind of went stagnant for a little while because I got too comfortable as a leader. I wasn't pushing myself. I wasn't trying to inspire my team. I was just comfortable. They were doing their job. I was, if I wanted to, going to grow the business, but I didn't have to. And that was a tricky place from a leadership point of view, because it was, I think things got sloppy in my business at that point. So not only was I sloppy as an individual, but I was sloppy as a leader. So I wasn't giving my own team accountability. I wasn't giving my own team that person to look up to. Now, if I recognize anything, it's that I probably let myself down and let my team down for probably about a year during the business's period. It was probably about the second year of the business. We're in year 5 now. I'm pleased to say we're kind of back on track. But there was definitely about a year's period where we could have done way more. We could have done way more. So does that answer your question?
Absolutely. No, I mean, it does. I'm kind of interested then. So did you see after that second year, and I take it you sort of started to realize that you needed to sort of leading yourself and leading your team. After you started realizing that and putting things into place for leadership, how did you see your results from your business? Because everybody asks me this all the time, why is leadership so important? How can I relate leadership to the bottom line? Did you see that on a true scale?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess like one of the things we've got to be careful of is the difference between leadership and management. And I see the two as slightly different, but both important in their own way. So leadership I see as more like the kind of leading from the front, inspiring your team, creating this vision and this picture of what you want to achieve and having people buy into that. Whereas management is more like the day-to-day operations and making sure that people are where they should be when they should be and doing the things that they should be. So I think if, again, being totally honest and transparent here, I think we were both doing both very badly. I don't think I had that vision. So, to focus on the leadership element of it, I don't think I had that vision at the time of what I wanted to create. I didn't really know where I wanted to go. All I'd known until that point was that I didn't like my job and I wanted to do something differently. And that was kind of my vision, was getting out of work. That was the picture I built for myself that motivated myself and inspired myself. But once we got comfortable, I think that kind of was that thing that had motivated me before almost became a hindrance now, because we'd achieved that milestone. What was motivating was now demotivating, because it's like, well, I've done it now.
Yeah.
So what next?
So how did you turn it around then? How did you turn that around?
Yeah, well, good question. And I think actually by the people that I work with. So there's a couple of things we do outside of trade stays, and that is we also train and mentor other people. So I developed a bit of a passion for wanting to help other people create the same sort of freedoms that I'd managed to create for myself. So we started working with a few clients. We started putting together training programs. And I think that's where my passion reignited, was when I started to help other people follow the same path and have other people tell me, do you know what, I followed what you advised me to and I'm able to quit my job now. There really is no feeling like that for me. But that also comes with a responsibility. Okay, because to lead those people and be a figurehead of, you can get out of your job through property if you want to build something passive for yourself and build a business for yourself, this is how you can do it. But to be that figurehead, you have to continue to grow. Okay, you have to continue to lead, and you have to inspire people to want to take action and make changes themselves. So I think having that early success of managing to help a couple of people get out of their jobs really incentivized me to want to grow my own business. And then obviously the more we grew, the more people we got out of their jobs, that we went into partnerships with some of them to cover different geographical areas of the UK that I couldn't cover myself. And that's why we now have access, we now have presence in not just London where we started, but in Bedford, Luton, Birmingham, Coventry, and Derby and Nottingham, and Newbury as well. And that's because we have different partners in those different towns. So although they're all part of the Trade Stays brand, they are unique businesses, of which I'm a half owner and they're a half owner. But we all operate under one group brand to allow us to cover much wider geographical areas. So that in itself became quite exciting for me. That project gave me something to kind of hang my hat on and want to lead my partners in, because they'd signed up to come and work with me in a partnership, and having that business partnership kind of gives you that accountability and that somebody else that you're doing it for. Okay, so yeah, I could still wake up tomorrow and not get out of bed if I really wanted to, but then it's not just me I'm letting down. It's my business partners in Bedford, it's my partners in Luton, it's my team in London, it's my new sales team, it's my wife, my child, my partners up in the north of England. So there becomes much more incentive to, I guess, get the thing done. And you especially when you're the one leading the charge on it, you've got to be at the forefront with a vision of where you want to take it. And I guess this is the great thing about Trade Stays as a brand. It's given us that vision. Okay, we know exactly what we want to create now. We want national coverage. We want to be able to source and set up properties anywhere in the UK for teams of traveling contractors to provide that great stay experience.
Yeah, that's no, keep going.
But mate, that's kind of where I got to with it. So that having that thing to get up for, having that project that you want to hang your hat on and be able to be proud of, is so important.
I mean, I think that's an amazing what you just described, and I think, you know, being able to look at what you've accomplished. You know, it started off you wanting to self-lead and get yourself out of a situation that you weren't no longer happy in, and get your, you know, financial freedom and get into something that you really were passionate about. And then over time, that passion developed into wanting to help others and wanting to help, and it came about the people, became about more about how you can help others and help your customers, and less about sort of getting you out that situation. So I think that emulates exactly sort of what I think about leadership, in that leadership is all about helping other people find out the solutions for themselves and grow themselves and achieve what they want to do and achieve their passions. So, you know, for me, you're achieving exactly what I think a leader should do. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's an amazing story. So
Thanks, man.
Thank you ever so much. I mean, there's only two more questions I really sort of wanted to run past you as we sort of start to bring this podcast to an end. So the first thing is what I always ask is for someone the guest to ask me a question, a leadership question, not just like, you know, football or weather or whatever. A leadership question that I will then answer at the beginning of the next podcast. So I won't answer it now, even though I've tried. But if you were to ask me the question, and then I'll answer at the beginning of the next podcast.
Okay, so let me ask you one that's really relevant for us now, going through a period of fairly rapid growth. So how do you think a leader should change as a team grows around them?
Okay, as a team's getting bigger, yeah.
As you're growing your company, how do you think the leadership styles need to adapt to that situation?
How many people in your teams or partners? How many people would you say come under the brand at the moment?
Bear with me. Are we counting contractors as well?
Oh, well, I mean, the people that you would lead, I would say.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12.
Okay, yeah.
12 plus myself at the moment. So we're still a fairly small team right now.
No, I mean, well, fairly big, I'd say. But yeah, I think there is a difference. There is a very distinct difference. I'm not going to answer it now. Between leading a team of that size and then growing it into then leading teams of hundreds or thousands of people.
Exactly.
Great. I'm excited about that question. That's a great question.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you very much. So my last question, Chris, to wrap up this podcast, is to ask you, what do you think is the most important aspect of leadership?
Cool. For me, and I guess this is fairly personal, right? But for me, it's about creating an image of what you want to achieve, creating that dream outcome and inspiring others to buy into that, so that you're all moving in the same direction. For me, I think that's how I define leadership, is the ability to create, or the most important part of it is the ability to create this vision of what your company is about, what you're trying to do, what service are you trying to provide to the world, and have everyone on board with that service and buying into the same end goal for where you want to get.
That's fantastic, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure to have this time with you today. Thank you ever so much, and just keep doing what you're doing. And I'm going to continue to watch your company and your career develop, because it's interesting. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks very much. It's been really great catching up with you as well, mate. Good to see you again.
You too. Cheers. Thank you.
Take care.